Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns, the Anti-Federalist. Got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty does. It does work for you. Oh, boy, I'm taking a deep breath and sighing. Yes, this is Tom Navolis, your host, and absolutely delighted that you're here again this week with me. So much. Some of the occurrences of this week I'm not even going to get into because there are no answers for any particulars, but what I do want to discuss is the source and root of what many of our issues are. So as far as Las Vegas goes, I am, as we all are, very distressed that something like that would occur, but because we have, as I talked about the last couple weeks, not a moral and virtuous people that understand our founders' intent, not just for constitutionalism, but what the general ideas of morality should be, versus the perversion of all the isms, and the greatest ism that is affecting this aspect of society is humanism and the attack on the Christian religion. So where do you expect to get your morality? And we're going to talk about that some in reference to education. But if there's anything that I do want to bring to you from what would have been a founder's perspective and what we're dealing with in today's America that is impacting us very significantly, that obviously would be with this Antifa and many of the things that we continue to see with the kneeling, continue to see with the issues in colleges and professors at Loyola University saying in particular that to take and have these violent outbursts is good for the country. That's not what the founders said. That's not what the founders intended. As a matter of fact, the founders were very, very clear that that type of internal domestic violence was something that needed to be, called on the carpet. To the point we can think about Shays' rebellion during that period of time. And this is where a lot of people have a hard time with Sam Adams, because during the Shay rebellion, Sam Adams said, "Hang 'em." And everybody was shocked. Everyone was shocked, going, "Wait a minute, Sam, these folks are rebelling for a reason. They're rebelling because they're not being taken care of, by the promises of the government and all of that." He said, "No, look, they are violating the overall common moral trust of the people. There's better ways to approach on how you get your point across. And violence is not the way. The rebellion is not the way." They said, "Wait a minute. Can't you justify what they're doing based on what was happening with the Revolutionary War?" And he said, No, not at all. They are not one and the same. The whole idea, as I read to you last week in the letter from Madison, was that the war, that rebellion that came out that way, was a result of the revolution. That was something that was an occurrence of the revolution. That was not the revolution. The war was not the revolution. The revolution was that of the ideas, of the mindset, of the understanding of the principles of truth that came from, everything that they were reading, everything that the founders read as we go into ancient history and all, but also from the Great Awakening. And that there was a moral context, a moral thinking, a moral component of everything that was there for that revolution in the mind first. It was a revolution of the mind. And so what Shay was doing was in violation of what it would take to come and petition and do all of those things and redress, which was always part of a state constitution, and then as well as it became part later in the federal constitution to be able to petition. So when people think about this whole Antifa thing, They are anarchists, and we had anarchists. We had anarchists for many years in the mid-1800s, early 1900s. That's not anything new. We've had the communists around since the 1900s in particular. The 1800s, we had all of the, whatever you want to call them, the socialists, the utopians. And as you remember, Sam Adams said that utopianism is unconstitutional. So when you look at the framework and we try to understand what is going on, all of these people that are spewing this idea of this social this and that and this and these whining about the First Amendment, they have no clue to which they are talking about. They are coming from an uneducated and perverted perspective. Oh, in particular, in that one guy that plays for a Cleveland basketball team, I feel very, very sorry for that young man. He's done a lot of good stuff into his community, but he was not taught. And he really took egg on his face by calling you and me and listeners of this program and those that have read and dig into the Founding Fathers and understanding the truths of this republic. Yeah, he really did. He really got egg on his face for calling us uneducated and other names to which I can't remember. Also, I don't want to try and say them, but it was very, very silly on his part to make a generalized statement like that, which, you know what, we all make generalized statements. But let's get real. When you're talking about what we understand and what the voters understand, what the people understand, I think we need to start driving to that clarity. That's really what I want to talk about this week. And the books are leaning over here in the bookshelf because I jerked out volume 1, and I was going to take and start driving into a little bit more of, what is a republic? How does that function? And then federalism, because what we're seeing is that is not what is happening today in the United States. We're not operating and functioning according to founders' original intent for a federal system that would function in the context of a republic, a constitutional republic nonetheless. So I started down that path, and I have all these references in front of me. I have the book open. I have the book marked, doing my old underlying thing and everything like that. And then, the tragedy that happened was impacting on me this week, and listening to people and trying to go back to those elements of what is true. And then I found that I was somewhat using a definition of terms incorrectly. I was using, even on Twitter, the word Americanism. Americanism I captured from Witherspoon, in that he was the first one to really coin that term, Americanism. I started generalizing it. I generalized it from Americanism, Americanism, made in America, down to founders' original intent, so on and so forth. Well, the real context, the real etymology, if you will, of the word is that Americanism is really referring to language, those words and definitions that are uniquely American. So we still have, quite frankly, as I was doing a little research on that, we still have people in England that are upset with we in America because we have destroyed the English language. Well, I guess in that case, we can call it Americanism. We call it the American language. So instead of the world really speaking English, because they don't have all of those various accents, I guess the closest would be as if you lived in New England. But reality, I think that the world speaks American, because everybody tries to take and have us come and teach them how to speak in our language. So do we speak English? No, because I even when I do my Sam Adams stuff, I can't even get the New England accent right, let alone an English accent. But so, you know what? I speak Midwest American, folks, so I do have an accent. And that be what it is. And that's exactly, I think, what Witherspoon was talking about, is that we have Americanism in the way that we speak, definition of our terms, and an understanding of how language is meant. Now, that takes me to where I want to go. I wanted to talk about why do we have all that's going on. Antifa, they're flat out a strong component, purposefully designed, not just from the mindset of the anarchists, but they are purposefully designed from their communist root, not from their just socialist route, but this is Marxism and radical Marxism at its best. It's not just anarchy. So it takes you back, and you gotta go back into the archives, folks, and you gotta go listen, because I'm not going to get into it. It is the Kozak plan with not a shot fired. But in some cases, I believe what Antifa and some of the others that we're going to be seeing in the future here in America is we're going to have shots fired, which is very, very sad in my opinion. But unfortunately, I really believe that we're at that place. But more so, where we're at that place is this immediate reaction to what happened in Las Vegas, is that now we have the pressure from above, as well as you have all of these dweebs, these knuckleheads, these dupes of actors, actresses, and all of these different groups that are the pressure from below. And then all of your socialist communists in the political party called the Democrats are the pressure from above. So now we have that pressure from above and the pressure from below, once again, on what? On gun control. Ladies and gentlemen, guns are not the issue. It is the morality. It is the lack of God. It is the lack of that understanding of what we're really going to dig into in the next segment on founders' intent, especially for education. I brought some of that to you from the University of Virginia, and yes, the wall is still a little on the empty side. But the real point is that what are we teaching? What are we inculcating? Not just teaching. Remember, the terminology to inculcate is a component of teaching, which means to drive home, to inundate, to bring to mind, to press in deeper and harder that which are the truths that we want espoused, those truths that we want made known into every individual that's in America, versus the insanities that are out there today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the real heart of the issue, is that we do not have people standing firm on all the fundamental beliefs that the founders intended, and we're going to get into that in this next segment, because the educational system has been absolutely taken over, as was read into, yes, the 1963 congressional record laying out and what the goals of the communists were for America. And then you had Khrushchev stomping his shoe on the podium at the UN that he would take over America from the inside and not from the outside. So, all of these different things, pressure from below, pressure from above, the shoe banging, and just the whole determination of all those various things is extremely interesting and coming to a head with the Obama secret army, that being the Antifa and all of the other groups. So very, very interesting, and it all culminates in what's been happening in schools. And yeah, I'm going to hammer on you pastors out there, because as I brought out in the Barna report, it's all your fault. It's your fault for buying into all the insanities of the 501c3, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to have a serious conversation about that as we get into what is going to be in that next segment from a guy by the name of Benjamin Rush. So what I'd like you to do is to take that, chew on it, during this commercial break, and looking forward to having you come back again in the next segment of Samuel Adams. Yes, he did. He returned, and the Anti-Federalists, they absolutely got it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists, they got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty works for you. And again, I really do hope that you are taking and looking at the other host pages here on the network, that you're seeing what's available in daily programming every afternoon and evening, especially those people that live in the Maryland market. And then look at everybody else that's on the network, and hopefully that you're enjoying what they have to offer you and to bring information so that it's for you for liberty. And we're going to talk about liberty and what it really means. But you know what? Go ahead. Take and participate. Click on that little donate button there and participate as you can, so that we can really move forward in ensuring that liberty comes to you through this network. And as I think about that, is that your liberty wants to be encroached upon and stopped. We thought that we were going to make some good headway, especially with the election of Donald Trump, and we have been. We really, really, really have been. If you take and you go look at what laws have been passed, there's a number of different things, what rules and regulations are being rescinded. There is a lot of positive stuff happening. But once again, you can't eat the elephant all in one bite. And, you know, I got to tell you, at best, if we can take and pull out a few of the hairs out of the elephant's tail, that is going to be wonderful as we chew through what it's going to take to eat this beast of over 100 years of destruction. So, you know, that's what we're up against. But worse, it's not just an elephant, because an elephant, you know, they're kind of big and you can get them under control. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a hydra. We are up against a hydra, which is an evil beast with many heads. And as you know from that Greek mythology, and when you lop one of those evil heads off, another one grows back. So we really have our work cut out for us in doing that. And one of the ways that we can do it is to recapture our educational system. And this is where you pastors out there and you church leaders really need to get off the duff and get your people educated. So what I was going to do is try and talk about federalism and talk about what is a republic based on the Founders Constitution and all the writings in there. There's a couple very in-depth chapters with all that foundational writing. But I kind of got caught up with Benjamin Rush. Benjamin Rush, the reason I got caught up with him was that when I was looking at what was going on in that early educational days at Princeton, when I was looking at him going over to ask Witherspoon to come and become president of Princeton, it just took me down that other rabbit hole. And I like going down those rabbit holes. You never know what carrot you're going to find. And in this case, I found this carrot by Benjamin Rush written in 1786. So let's put it in the framework. We're right there at that time when we were going to look at, you know, the Maryland Conference was going on, and they were calling for another convention that would happen in Philadelphia in 87. I thought about just trying to give you the synopsis of things, but I think what I'm going to have to do is read and get through and make commentary as I go through this letter that Benjamin Rush wrote. And it was more than a letter. It's titled, Thoughts Upon the Mode of Education Proper in a Republic. So that's where I got tied in on the Republic side, is that, okay, that's what Benjamin Rush was talking about. And remember that, in essence, under the existing Constitution, being the Articles of Confederation, we had a republic. The Republic did not come into formation under the Constitution of 87. We already had a republic. We had a republic. Its federation was different. It was a confederation versus a federation that we're not going to get into. But let's get to this because there's a lot of commentary that I want to deal with right in what he wrote. Again, on the thoughts upon the mode of education proper in a republic. And this was written in Philadelphia by Benjamin Rush in 1786. I may slip on and off my glasses as I need them, but he goes on and he starts with, the business of education has acquired a new complexion by the independence of our country. The form of government we have assumed has created a new class of duties to every American. It becomes us, therefore, to examine our former habits upon this subject, and in laying the foundations for nurseries of wise and good men, to adapt our modes of teaching to the peculiar form of our government. Right there. I probably can make 5 programs just out of that paragraph alone. So what we have is this identity of this new form of government. And we need to look at our habits of education in particular around that. Our habits of education, ladies and gentlemen, today are nowhere near what it means to have a republic. No, because most people talk about we're a democracy, we're this, we're that. We're not any of the things that are promoted in today's educational system. Even in universities, you have Antifa, where they're Marxist, radical, communist insanity. Anyway, let me move on. He continues in the next paragraph. The first mark that I shall make upon this subject is that an education in our own is to be preferred to an education in a foreign country. Stop right there. The point he was trying to say is we need to be educated about America more than we need to be educated about another country. In addition to that, his intent, as you read more Benjamin Rush and the other founders, is that it's preferred you be educated here in this country, not going to, what's that thing called, as a Rhodes Scholar. That's not proper, because you remember, Rhodes was a socialist. All right, continuing on, is that the principle of patriotism stands in need of the reinforcement of prejudice, and it is well known that our strongest prejudices in favor of our country are formed in the first 1 and 20 years of our lives. Do you get that? That's why, when we look at what the socialist, and when you look at Horace Mann, who hated families, who was a humanist, said, let me get a hold of those kids and I can change them. Let me change that whole form of that educational system, where Benjamin Rush is acknowledging that first year, meaning 1 year old, which was some of the things that I talked about, last week and didn't get a chance to finish, in how do you raise a kid up and when do you start raising them up, which is really unique. But between that and 20 years old, ladies and gentlemen, that's what he's talking about. The policy of the Lacedaemonians is well worthy of our imitation. When Antipater demanded 50 of their children as hostages for the fulfillment of a distant engagement, those wise Republicans, refused to comply with his demand, but readily offered him double the number of their adult citizens, whose habits and prejudices could not be shaken by residing in a foreign country. You get that? Get it? Start getting that nailed in. Passing by, in this place, the advantages to the community from the early attachment of youth to the laws and constitution of their country, I shall only remark that young men who have trodden in the paths of science together, or have joined in the same sports, whether of swimming, skating, fishing, or hunting, generally feel through life such ties to each other as add greatly to the obligations of mutual benevolence. I conceive the education of our youth in this country to be peculiarly necessary in Pennsylvania, while our citizens are composed of the natives of so many different kingdoms in Europe. Our schools of learning, by producing one general and uniform system of education, will render the masses of the people more homogeneous and thereby fit them more easily for uniform and peaceable government. Ladies and gentlemen, our education system doesn't do that anymore. Our schools, they're uniform, all right, and they're producing one general uniform system, but it's not the American system. It's not for America. It's not for patriotism. It is for globalism. It is for modern feudalism. It has nothing to do with Benjamin Rush is talking about here, about developing those patriots so that they would be fit. We would have a mass of people more homogeneous and thereby fit for more easily for uniform and peaceable government. We have disunity because our educational system is creating the unity. My commentary here is we need to get rid of the national educational department. We need to disband it completely, and we need to then drive home with the parents in an understanding that, we need to educate according to these fundamental principles. He continues, I proceed, he says, in the next place, to inquire what mode of education we shall adopt so as to secure the state all the advantages that are to be derived from the proper instruction of the youth. And here I beg leave to remark that the only foundation for useful education in a republic, is to be laid in religion. Okay? The only foundation for a useful education in a republic is to be laid in religion. Interesting. Okay, so then he goes on here. Without this, there can be no virtue. And without virtue, there can be no liberty. And liberty is the object and life of all republican governments. It's not economy, okay? It's liberty. Okay, interesting. Such in my veneration for every religion that reveals the attributes of the deity or a future state of rewards and punishment, that I had rather see the opinions of Confucius or Mohammed inculcated upon our youth than see them grow up wholly devoid of a system of religious principles. But, as we get ready to move on to the next segment, but the religion I mean to recommend in this place is the religion of Jesus Christ. Okay? He's laying it out, ladies and gentlemen, very, very firmly. Yeah, I guess if there's nothing else, better than humanism, better than socialism, better than communism, better than utopianism, would be something around Confucianism or even Mohammedism that people would learn, but that's not what America is about. Reject those. What we are about is a religion of Jesus Christ. So, as we wrap up this segment, we have to consider, before we go into this, because I'll tell you what, this is like 11 pages of stuff, and we're barely into page 2 for today's program. What we have to consider and ponder on is that the educational system is broke. It has been broke, and we've been saying it's broke. But you know what? Until we morally stand up for that, and yes, you pastors, you elders, you deacons, all of you religious people, you so-called evangelical Christian boxed-in folks need to understand that we have to take our country back, our culture back, only by the educational system, and you gave it up. So what we're going to do is continue on with what Benjamin Rush had to say, because guess what? He was a solid Christian guy, and America is designed for that. It's not designed for bad eschatology, which we see out there every day. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back in this next segment when Samuel Adams returns and the Anti-Federalists, yes, they did. They got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network to continue to look through our founders' intent for our development of education and what needs to be inculcated into our youth here in the United States to, yes, make America great again. Come on back into the next segment. Looking forward to it. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns, the Anti-Federalists. Yes, they did. They got it right here with Tom Navolis, your host. And yeah, I've been pretty harsh today on pastors and, the staff, the whatever you want to call it, deacons, elders, and all of that in the evangelical churches, because as I look back over my over 40 years, I guess, close to that, of really understanding what it means to be a believer in Jesus Christ, I ultimately have come to the conclusion that we have this evangelical box that is outside the framework of what the founders intended and what they saw America. I was very upset to see a tweet come out of a pastor that I know of, and or it was probably somebody that he doesn't tweet really, so he had somebody tweet for him. But you know what? According to founders' original intent, we should not have to worry about persecution in the United States because of our constitutional framework. So with that, let me get back to what Benjamin Rush was talking about in his thoughts upon the mode of education in a republic. He continues from what we did in the last segment. We're not going to get through this. I'm going to have to follow up probably for the next 2 to 3 weeks on this because it's so critical that you understand it. Maybe you don't want to understand it. I don't know. But we'll see. I might find some other rabbit hole to go down. He continues, it is foreign to my purpose to hint at the arguments which establish the truth of Christian revelation. My only business is to declare that all its doctrines and precepts are calculated to promote the happiness of society and the safety and well-being of civil government. Geez, that's the same thing that Calvin said, too, in a different way. As I continue with Rush, a Christian cannot fail of being a Republican. The history of the creation of man and the revelation of our species is to each other by birth, which is recorded in the Old Testament, is the best refutation that can be given to the divine right of kings, and the strongest argument that can be used in favor of the original natural equality of all mankind. A Christian, I say again, cannot fail of being a Republican, for every precept of the gospel inculcates those degrees of humanity, self-denial, and brotherly kindness which are directly opposed to the pride of monarchy and the pageantry of a court. A Christian cannot fail of being useful to the republic, for his religion teacheth him that no man liveth to himself. And lastly, a Christian cannot fail of being wholly in offense, for his religion teaches him in all things to do to others what he would wish, in like circumstances, they should do to him. I am aware that I dissent from one of those paradoxical opinions with which modern times abound. Boy, he's talking about modern times abounding then. What do they abound like now? My goodness, it's just amazing. That what I just spoke in that last paragraph is so contrary to what we see in the majority of denominations in America today. And in the what I call the box of the evangelicals, Barna Report even talks about that here he goes, a paradoxical opinion in the modern time. It kind of cracks me up, Let's see. He continues that it is improper to fill the minds of youth with holy smokes. I got to start this over again, because let's look at what he's writing here in comparison to what we see in the modern educational system. It's the same battle. Okay? Same battle. I am aware that I dissent from one of those paradoxical opinions with which modern times abound. And that's what a colon, okay? That it is improper to fill the minds of youth with religious prejudice of any kind, and that they should be left to choose their own principles after they have arrived at an age in which they are capable of judging for themselves. Sounds exactly like what we're dealing with. And it's worse, it's worse because the churches were a lot different in that period than what we have now, okay? So he goes on, could we preserve the mind in childhood and youth a perfect blank? This plan of education would have more to recommend it, but this we know to be impossible. The human mind runs as naturally into principles as it does after facts. So it comes to, what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? How do you think? Christian, how do you think? I had a conversation with a gentleman this morning relative to being a thinking Christian. That's a thinking human being. And I got to tell you, you know what? I met so many that prefer to believe, so many Christians that prefer to fall into this category of blissfully ignorant, that it just baffles my mind that we are to be the thinkers because God created us to do so. So anyway, we move on. The human mind runs as naturally into principles as it does after facts. It submits with difficulty to those restraints or partial discoveries which are imposed upon it in the infancy of reason. Hence, the impatience of children to be informed upon all subjects that relate to the invisible world. But I beg leave to ask, why should we pursue a different plan of education with respect to religion from that which we pursue in teaching the arts and sciences? Do we leave our youth to acquire systems of geography, philosophy, or politics till they have arrived at an age in which they are capable of judging for themselves? We do not. I claim no more then for religion than for the other sciences. And I add further that if our youth are disposed after they are of age to think for themselves, a knowledge of one system will be the best means of conducting them in a free inquiry into other systems of religion, just as acquaintances with one system of philosophy is best introduction to the study of all other systems in the world. I must beg leave upon this subject to go one step further. In order more effectually to secure to our youth the advantages of a religious education, it is necessary to impose upon them the doctrines and disciplines of a particular church. Man is naturally an ungovernable animal. Whoa! So, if you have somebody that goes out and does evil, they're no different than an ungovernable animal. So man, and that's so biblically sound. We're predestined as sinners. Okay, we're disposed. Let me restate that. Not predestined, but we're predisposed as sinners. So man is naturally an ungovernable animal, and observation in particular societies and countries will teach us that when we add the restraints of ecclesiastical to those of domestic and civil government, we produce in him the highest degree of order and virtue. That fashionable liberty which refuses to associate with any one sect of Christians is seldom useful to itself or to society, and may fitly compared to the unprofitable bravery of a soldier who wastes his valor in solitary enterprises without the aid or effect of military association. Far be it from me to recommend the doctrines or modes of worship of any one denomination of Christians. I only recommend to the persons entrusted with the education of youth to inculcate upon them a strict conformity to that mode of worship which is most agreeable to their conscience or the inclination of their parents. So if we've had, you stop here and you start thinking about it for a while. So if we've had the ideas of religion, the Ten Commandments in particular, which are just the fundamentals of a relationship to God and man man to society, removed from education alone. Not talking about any denomination, not talking about any of these other aspects which he was speaking about, then what we're missing is the whole context of how do we take and we bring that naturally unbridled animal into some sense of order. And then we wonder when we have people acting as savages, as a savage animal, as we did this past week, we wonder why. Well, if you have no moral context, and you have then no virtue, and you do not understand the fundamentals of liberty by that context, then what do you think about? You're going to think about, just your natural insanities. Yeah, they are. They become that. Because without having that framework, and without having that understanding of that God-built framework, then you go down your own course of those things, and we do. We call that, evil. We call it, insane. We call it all these other things, instead of, why don't we look at it from the perspective that Benjamin Rush was looking at. And he was talking about, under this head, I must be excused in not agreeing with those modern writers who have opposed the use of the Bible as a school book. Holy smokes, when was this? This was 1786. And already he's confronting the idea that there were modern writers opposed to using the Bible as a school book. The only objection I know to it is its division into chapters and verses and its improper punctuation, which render it more difficult book to read well than many others. But these defects may easily be corrected, and the disadvantages of them are not mentioned in the immense advantages of making children early and intimately acquainted with the means of acquiring happiness both here and hereafter. How great is the difference between making young people acquainted with the interesting and entertaining truths contained in the Bible, and the fables of Moore and Croxall, or the doubtful histories of antiquity. I maintain that there is no book of its size in the whole world that contains half so much useful knowledge for the government of the states or the direction of the affairs of individuals as the Bible. To object to the practice of having it read in school because it tends to destroy our veneration for it is an argument that applies with equal force against the frequency of public worship and all other religious exercises. Well, right there, we don't have time to continue in what he's talking about as we have to wrap up for this week. But right there, we're seeing everything else is attacked. We're seeing the worship, public worship, all religious exercises being attacked, and using that same force against it as it is taking the Bible out of education, which he was talking about in 1786, ladies and gentlemen. So what we now see and what we now have is a capacity for evil to take and destroy the republic. Because if the republic is based upon liberty, and liberty is based upon virtue, and virtue comes from a clear understanding of what Christianity can teach, then I can only think that when we use any form of logic and reason, then what we're seeing is the regression, the digression of our society, is because we have destroyed the original intent of our educational system to the extent, even then, there were problems that were coming in so hard and fast in the 1800s like that, or the late 1700s into the 1800s, different than the Great Awakening. It just was causing numerous problems that we then moved into those early and mid 1800s. So Benjamin Rush, yeah, I think I will pick him up next week. So I don't have a lot of homework to do. I've got this great letter to utilize. But you have homework to do. And as you know, the link is there for you to go read this for yourself as you come back next week. And I do hope you do, to dig in deeper on what Sam Adams believed for education. And the Anti-Federalists, they got it right. Here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty does, it absolutely works for you if you pay attention to founders' original intent.